welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into something quite fascinating, maybe a bit unsettling too. Ether addiction.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that pops up based on listener questions, about unusual historical substance use.
Exactly. And we've got this source document, etheraddiction.pdf, that we're going to, well, dive into.
Our mission really is to unpack it for you. Pull out the key bits about the history, the social side, the effects.
You get a real sense of it. Because, let's be honest, ether probably isn't top of mind when you think about historical recreational drugs, is it?
Not at all.
So maybe the best place to start is, what is ether? And what was this whole etheromania thing about?
Okay, so diethyl ether, just ether, usually it's this volatile liquid, highly flammable.
Right.
And chemically, it affects the nervous system, kind of like alcohol, but different.
Yeah.
It also turned out to be an anesthetic, which is how we mostly know it now.
Oh.
And etheromania, that's just the term for being addicted to, well, inhaling it or drinking it.
Drinking it. Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And there's this interesting point from a 2003 study. In the source, it found ether does cause dependence, but the main thing seemed to be this really strong desire for more, not so much the classic physical withdrawal you might expect.
Huh. So less about the physical sickness when stopping, more about the craving.
Exactly, just wanting more and more.
That slight difference, maybe that's why it found acceptance in some places, like 19th century Ireland. The source mentions it got pretty popular there for a while.
It did, yeah, in the second half of the 19th century. And the context is fascinating.
How so?
Well, you had these Irish temperance movements fighting against alcohol abuse, right? And believe it or not, they sort of saw ether as acceptable, an okay substitute.
Seriously, an acceptable substitute.
Yeah. It shows how, even well-meaning social campaigns can have these really unexpected side effects, pushing people towards something potentially worse.
Wow. That is quite the historical irony. A temperance-approved ether habit. Okay. But that didn't stick everywhere, did it? The document shifts focus then to interwar Poland. Looks like it became a much bigger, darker issue there.
Oh, absolutely. Between the wars, Poland, and especially the Upper Silesia region, had a huge problem with ether consumption, a real social crisis.
And not just a few people on the fringes.
No. The source says drinking ether and things like Hoffman's drops, which contain it, was, well, really common.
Common enough to affect kids in school. I read that bit 1930s survey showing loads of school pupils drinking it regularly.
Yes. It was apparently quite widespread in some villages. Teachers were actually sending kids home because they were under the influence.
That's staggering, just trying to picture that. What does that say about life then? The pressures or maybe the lack of other options?
It paints a pretty bleak picture, doesn't it? And it wasn't just kids. Mine workers, too.
Ah, the miners.
Yeah, they drank it commonly, which led to a big safety issue, obviously. They ended up banning anyone intoxicated from entering the mines. Fire risk. Ether's incredibly flammable.
Right, of course.
And it got so bad that even factory doctors were warned to cut way back on buying ether for the offices. It just shows how deep it went across society.
And institutions got involved too, the church.
The Catholic Church took a pretty active role trying to fight it. You'd hear about it in sermons.
Really?
Yeah. And some priests would refuse absolution to addicts, apparently even reported people to the police sometimes.
So it was seen as a major moral and social failing.
Definitely. They were taking it very seriously.
And while Upper Silesia was ground zero, it wasn't contained there, was it? It spread.
That's right. The source mentions other areas too. Suwałki down in the southeast, the Beskidy Mountains, Kujawi, Pomerania, even around Częstochowa. It suggests a pretty significant spread across Poland.
Okay, so if it's spreading like that, there must have been a supply. Where was it all coming from? You could just buy it at the corner shop, presumably.
No, the main source was smuggling. Across the borders from Germany and Czechoslovakia, mostly.
Ah, cross-border smuggling.
Yeah, and the scale was pretty big. Authorities figured thousands of kilos were coming in each year.
Thousands.
How? Well, this is where it gets quite creative. They use people living near the border, obviously, but also dogs.
Dogs? You're kidding.
Nope. Specially trained dogs carrying ether in these metal containers strapped to them. They called them blackeny.
Wow. Smuggling dogs with ether canisters. That's quite an image.
Isn't it? Shows the lengths they went to. And it wasn't just dogs. People carried them too. Plus, hidden compartments in cars, even things like cable cars strung across rivers.
Cable cars across border rivers.
Well,
Resourceful.
Very. Whatever it took to meet the demand.
So once it got into Poland, how did it actually get to the people in the villages who were using it?
Again, pretty resourceful distribution. Wagons carrying straw were a good cover.
Okay.
Traveling salesmen, even organ grinders, beggars, they were all part of the network,
A
apparently.
whole underground economy.
Exactly. And within the villages, they had these spots called kaplitsky, means chapels,
Right.
but they weren't religious places in this context.
Right.
More like designated spots to buy and even use the ether. The source actually mentions accidents happening at these places, people being careless with fire near this highly flammable stuff.
Yeah, that sounds inevitable, sadly. Okay, so drinking it, it boils really easily
Yeah.
and doesn't mix with water. How on earth did they manage that?
Well, there was a technique, a sort of art to it, as the source puts it.
An art.
Yeah, you'd rinse your mouth with water first, cool it down, swallow some water to cool your throat, and quickly drink the ether and immediately follow it with more water.
Why the water after?
To stop it from just boiling off in your mouth or throat or, coming back up as a vaporous burp, they clearly figured out how to handle its physical quirks.
Huh. Quite the process. And was drinking the only way? Or did people inhale it too?
Inhalation was definitely another method, just breathing in the vapor.
Which it gives off readily, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, very readily at room temperature, and that way you avoid the stomach issues of drinking it, plus the effects were apparently shorter lasting.
Okay, so maybe preferable sometimes.
Could be, depending on the situation.
Right. So with all these problems, social issues, health risks, accidents, the authorities must have stepped in eventually. What did they do?
They did. The Polish Sejm, the parliament, banned selling ether for consumption back in 1923.
Okay, an early step.
Then, in 1928, they went further and officially classed ether as a drug, pulled it under the existing anti-drug laws,
Which
meant serious penalties. Prison time, up to 5 years, plus big fines, not just for smuggling or selling, but even just for having it.
so they really cracked down, legally speaking.
They tried. And it wasn't just laws. Later on, in the second half of the 1930s, you see more attention from the media, government bodies.
A bigger public focus.
Yeah. There was even a special conference about it in Katowice in May in 1936, run by the National Committee on Drugs. So a real concerted effort to tackle it.
We've talked a lot about the how and the where and the response.
Yeah.
But what about the why? What were the actual effects people were after? What did ether do?
Well, the source compares the intoxication to alcohol that says it's generally stronger, more potent.
Okay, like super alcohol.
Sort of, but also at higher doses because it messes with certain brain receptors. It's an NMDA antagonist.
Right.
Users could get distorted thinking, euphoria, and hallucinations, visual and auditory ones.
Ah, hallucinations. That would definitely add to the appeal beyond just getting drunk, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It likely played a big role in why people sought it out. A different kind of escape, perhaps.
Quite a contrast to its use in surgery. So this was clearly a big deal historically, especially in Poland. Is it still a thing at all today?
Interestingly, yes, but on a much, much smaller scale.
Yeah.
The document notes it's still sometimes consumed in border areas of Poland, Slovakia, Lithuania, and Estonia too, in a specific region called Satoma.
Really? Still hanging on in pockets.
Apparently so. Not widespread like before, but suggests maybe some lingering cultural habit or maybe just availability issues with other things. The source doesn't go deep, but it's a curious little footnote.
It is remarkable how these things can persist, even locally. Okay, lastly, the source mentions ether popping up in culture books, TV, movies. Seems it's captured some imaginations.
It definitely has. Way back, Tolstoy's War and Peace, set around 1812, mentions Hoffman's drops, which had ether, so people knew about it early on.
Right.
Then Georges Simenon used it in a Migrant novel in the 30s.
And then the big one, probably Hunter S. Thompson. Fear and Loathing.
Yes, that famous, very over-the-top quote about the ether binge, total helplessness and depravity.
Yeah, unforgettable. But the source warns that's heavily exaggerated.
Oh, massively. Thompson was all about the dramatic effect there. But it certainly put ether on the map for a lot of people, even if inaccurately.
Sure.
The source also flags Dr. Larch in John Irving's The Cider House Rules as an addict, Jean Mermoz in The Prince of the Skies, even a character in Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon.
So it keeps appearing as this sort of recurring dark motif in literature.
Seems so. And on TV, too. Historical shows like Borgia, Outlander, more modern stuff like American Horror Story, a Turkish series called Layla and Meknun, again, often playing up the effects dramatically.
Like even very recently.
Yeah. Apple TV's Severance apparently has a setting around an old ether plant, and there's ether huffing depicted. And a 2024 Danish film, The Girl with the Needle, reportedly features a lot of ether use.
So it still holds some kind of fascination, even if it's often sensationalized.
Exactly. Its strange, unsettling history keeps bubbling up in our stories.
Well, this has been quite the journey, hasn't it? Down a path I certainly didn't expect. We've seen ether's surprising past as a recreational drug.
Its huge social impact, especially in that interwar Poland period.
Yeah, the really specific ways people consumed it and how it echoes in books and film.
Hopefully, going through this source document has given you, our listeners, a clearer picture of this pretty unusual piece of history.
Yeah, it definitely shows how substances we think we know can have these hidden, complex pasts.
For sure.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about that history, especially in Poland,
Mm.
and that point about the lack of severe physical withdrawal,
Mm.
what does that make you think about addiction itself? About how society reacts?
Hmm.
About perception? Why did ether, of all things, have such a hold back then, only to be mostly forgotten in this way now?
Mm. It's complex, isn't it?
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.